Welcome to Lunch and Learn today. We are talking about ethical use of tools like ChatGPT in education. This whole Lunch and Learn semester, the whole series is going to be about artificial intelligence. We're doing a number of those. And then in December, we'll also, late November and in December, we'll talk about HiFlex as well. So we're going to bring that in with some lessons learned from our pilot from this semester. When we're thinking about our ethical use of ChatGPT tools like that, though, we're trying to think about, well, how can we actually use it in education appropriately? And how do we help our students learn to use that? And unfortunately, we might have to try to figure out, how do we know if they've used it or not? How might we be able to tell? So we're going to have those conversations today. All right. So Pauline, let's go to the next page. Ding. And if you can. And then what I want to ask you is go ahead and put into the chat, or feel free to unmute the number and the word that you think represents the picture that helps to explain how you feel about AI generators like ChatGPT. Which one of these pictures really inspires you about how you feel? Ooh. I'm seeing a lot of 2s and 3s. Oh, a 5. Oh, goodness. Yeah. And a 4. Excellent. Excellent. Terrific. So I saw a lot of 2s and a lot of 3s. So I don't see words for those, though. Anyone want to pop a word in there that explains what they thought when they saw 2, or what they thought when they saw 3 or 4 or 5? Those are our main ones that people selected. Intrigued, so we have an intrigued idea. Let's find out more about this. Unsure. I don't know where this is going. I don't know how to use it. I love it, Jill. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. Yeah. So we have a few of those words, and I know when I was thinking about these, oh, excellent. Kathleen added there are benefits, but there are possible drawbacks. Not sure if this is going to prevent students from actually learning. And in our next one in October, we're going to talk about, is it a tool or is it a threat? I'm curious, unsure how it's going to affect the education, how can it be monitored, and we'll see. Let's see how this turns out. All right, so when we're thinking about all these ways that we feel, let's go ahead, Pauline, and we'll move into the next part. One of the things that we have to talk about when we're talking about the ethical use, it's kind of interesting to have that conversation before we even decide why. Why do we need to have this conversation about, is there a way to ethically use it, unless we talk about what are some potential benefits when we're using these AI generators? Because if there's no benefit, then really we just want to squelch it all. We don't want to deal with it. But maybe if there are some benefits, we really want to have conversations about, okay, then how do we use it the right way? How can we use it in a beneficial way? So there are benefits of tools like ChatGPT for education. You can brainstorm ideas with it. You can use it to generate outlines, and you can access information. I've got a few things that kind of help define those a little better. Pauline, if you'll move on to the next one. Ding. So here are brainstorming ideas. I'm going to drop into the chat for you also. There was a blog where I found some sample prompts, and I want to share those with you so that you can access those as well. There's 100 of them. So these brainstorming prompts, for instance, it'll say, I am working on blank. Can you help me generate some innovative ideas and potential approaches to address this blank? This is something that you can use, or something that your students could use that could help them get some ideas. There really isn't much difference between this and using Google to get some ideas about a topic, right? Except ChatGPT presents it in more human like language. So it gives them some paragraphs. You'll notice the second one, though, this is something maybe you might like to use as an instructor. I'm teaching my students to research on blank. Can you suggest some key approaches, research methods, and data collection techniques for my students? So then you as an instructor could use this as an idea. Maybe you're trying to teach a topic in a different way. You've taught it for 6 semesters in a row and you want to breathe some new life into it. There are some ways that you can look at this and help kind of brainstorm those ideas. And this is absolutely ethical, unless you have some other kind of, I don't know, defined assignment where everything must be their own. But we all get our ideas from somewhere. And we'd like to think that we have some innovative, brand new ideas. In my life, I've thought I had a couple of them, and then I heard someone else say them, and I thought, man, I thought that was my idea. We might find that other people have some similar ideas, and maybe we can build them together. But brainstorming ideas is absolutely a way that you can use something like ChatGPT, or that your students could use it, and it would be an ethical use. Pauline, let's go to the next one. Now, generating outlines, you might say, well, okay, what do you mean? If you were here a couple of weeks ago, you saw that we could do a lesson plan outline. What I asked it to do, I asked ChatGPT to create an outline for presentation about equity in education. And it gave me several lines in the outline. The Roman numeral 8 that it gave me in the outline said that for equity in education, we'd want to explore the role of stakeholders. And it gave me A through F as stakeholders there. Government and policymakers were A, B, educators and school administrators, all the way to F, business and industry might need to know about equity in education. Now, ChatGPT has a memory. So I had put in there, create an outline for presentation about equity in education. It generated the outline. Phew. The next line, I can refine that. It has a memory of what it did. So I said, revise this outline for an audience of college students in a teacher education course. Because I'm thinking about our Bachelor of Science in Education course, maybe this would be something that would be applicable. So it regenerated it, and you'll notice that it used kind of the same approach. And in Roman numeral 8, instead of saying the role of stakeholders, it said the role of aspiring educators. And A was future educators as change agents. B was the ethical responsibility of educators. And C was advocacy and leadership in promoting equity. So you'll see how it took an idea that it had in one outline, and it was able to modify that for a new purpose. Then I asked it, because they were long outlines, I said, I'm kind of being a little overwhelmed by this. What are some key differences between these two outlines? And it actually told me. Well, it gave me several ways that there were differences. And it said, well, the 6th way that they're different is the role of aspiring educators. The second outline dedicates a section to discussing the ethical responsibility and advocacy role of future educators. So it's interesting that it can respond to you. It can help you come up with these outlines. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago too, I could even ask it to create an outline for a video that I wanted to create. And it would say opening scene, and it will say pan across a room full of students in their desks with the educator at the front of the room lecturing, something like that. It gives you all of these ideas. These are absolutely ethical ways that you can begin, because it gives you ideas of places to start. But then when you add your information, when your students add their information, they have to add their own ideas. So again, having those first drafts, these outlines, these brainstorming places, there are really great ways that we can use this in our classroom and teach our students. These are ways that can help us begin our thinking, and then we just need to develop it further. Now, as we had listed the potential benefits that Kathleen had said and potential drawbacks, of course, I do see those drawbacks. The students might not choose to revise or might not choose to add their own ideas, but then we can handle those as we come across them. One of the reasons to discuss ChatGPT and tools like it are, number one, to take that mystery and the excitement out of it, where those students are just like, I'm going to see if I can get away with it. Now we're giving them real ways to use it. It's a little less attractive to do those things. Does it mean we'll eliminate it all? No. But at least it can help us move towards the right direction. Pauline, you want to go to the next one for us? All right, so you can also use tools like ChatGPT to access information. Perplexity AI is another tool. When you use this, it's a free tool, and I do have that for you, and I'll stick that in the chat as well. When you use Perplexity AI, you can ask it questions. The difference between, one major difference between ChatGPT and Perplexity AI is Perplexity will give you the sources right in the text and tell you where it got its information. ChatGPT does not do that. And if you ask it to, sometimes it makes it up, because if it doesn't have enough information, it'll make it up. So ChatGPT is good until 2021. It was cut off at that point. Perplexity is a live source, so it actually comes to more recent information. They call that live access. So I decided to ask Perplexity AI, what is Perplexity AI? Interestingly enough, it had an answer. It said Perplexity AI is an answer engine that uses large language models, those are LLMs, to deliver accurate answers to collect complex questions. And its resource was number one. And your number one resource that shows at the top was Perplexity AI. So it used itself as a resource. Then it says it's similar to OpenAI's ChatGPT and the Bing ChatGPT. So if you use Edge at all, you've seen Bing show up, and Bing also uses ChatGPT, but it can give you ideas. And this is really funny, and this is a total aside, but I just want to tell you this real quick. The other day I had looked up song lyrics for a song. It's by, by a band called Domestic Problems, and it was It's Funny or something like that. I looked up lyrics. Bing decided it wanted to be helpful, and on the side it created a song for me that was it was a funny song about domestic problems. So it said, oh, if you break a plate, it doesn't matter, it's okay, life will be all right. So Bing was trying really hard that day, just to put that out there. So if you use Edge, it's fun to see what might show up. And it says for that integration, it used resource two, Twitter. So you'll notice not all of the resources are great. Some of them are better than others. This question was interesting. Looking at the sources, it also had Wikipedia and it had a data scientist source. When I've used this before for some other real answers, like about schizophrenia or something like that, sometimes then you'll get the National Institute for Health. You'll get some more reliable sources as well. But this at least shows you where they got their information. So that's a nice thing for Perplexity. I could also see this as a critical thinking exercise for students to be able to evaluate their sources. So what's good about these sources, what's not good about these sources, how reliable could they be? So that's another kind of conversation that could be had with this. All right, Pauline, we're ready for the next one, and we've got a little bit of interaction here. All right, so I just talked to you about 3 ways that you could use AI generators. Which way do you like? Which way could you use? A, brainstorming ideas, B, generating outlines, C, accessing information, or maybe you have a D. That's something that I didn't mention, that it's a way that you've used it so far or that you're interested in learning more. I see some brainstorming ideas. I've got a generating outlines. Ooh, even an accessing information. Terrific. A and B, A and C. Ah, Alice says she's used it in all of these ways. So they work. Yes, Delora, that's fabulous. Thank you for pointing that out. You can use it to create rubrics as well. So if you are looking for it, it's all in your prompt, how you write it, that you say you want a rubric that addresses these particular criteria, and you want it to have 5 rows or 5 columns across, and it will help generate those rubric thoughts for you. Again, you might find that you need to personalize it further to make it fit better with your particular assignment or with your cohort of students, but it's a fabulous way to start those rubrics to get that idea. Any other thoughts before we move on? Excellent. All right, Pauline, ding. So here we go. We want to talk a little bit about, okay, so we just talked about some of the ethical ways, but we know that sometimes it might not be used in an ethical way. So here at Delaware Tech, we do have Turnitin as a resource that you can use when students submit writing for you. And I have videos for you to show you how to turn it on. turn on, turn it in, things like that. But really, I just want to talk to you about the tool today. But you can reach out to me if you need any kind of tutorials or videos that help you with that. Or Pauline, if you have a second, maybe you can find that resource. I'm not sure once you advance it to the next screen for me. All right, so here's Turnitin. And on the edge of when you use Turnitin, students submit an assignment, and then it is a plagiarism or similarity detector is what it has traditionally been. So you would get a number that they had 30% similarity to other sources, or maybe they had 2% similarity. When I was doing my doctorate, we had Turnitin, and sometimes my answers had 0% similarity. And I wasn't sure if that was because I was such an innovative thinker or if I was just way off base. I wasn't sure. So you have different numbers that would be presented there. So you'll see for this one, Turnitin. It has come up with an AI similarity number. This particular example that I'm going to show you is 8%. So it shows you, well, this has a possibility of 8%, but I do want to point out its reliability. It's 98% accurate if your students use ChatGPT. Now, if you were with me a couple weeks ago, or if you caught it when I mentioned it earlier, there are other sources. I showed you Perplexity AI. If they copied that and put it in there, it may not be able to detect it as well. For somehow there, logarithms, all this other stuff, that when, and you'll notice too, as you might see some more AI generated things, that's why it's good to play with ChatGPT, so you can start to see kind of the phraseology that is present in those things. Or as I pointed out, in the last Lunch and Learn, there's often when I will put something in there, it'll give me a little introductory paragraph, and then it will give me a closing paragraph that are very good. And sometimes if you're seeing those, it could be an indication that students used it because maybe they didn't think about opening and closing paragraphs. It's just something else that could help you notice it. I've noticed some strange syntax, for instance, when I'm looking at AI generated things. But there's still no guarantee of if that's that. Just like when it told you it was 35% similar, did that mean the student cheated? No, not necessarily. Maybe they're not good at paraphrasing. Maybe they forgot quotation marks. Maybe it counted their reference page. There were lots of reasons that you needed to investigate it further. That's really what this is. This AI detection is a reason to investigate it further. It's a piece of data. It is not the guillotine, right? Okay. So if we move to the next screen, Pauline, then we see this is something else. If you mouse over that number, it gives you this dialog box and tells you, caution, this percentage may not indicate academic misconduct. Review is required. So just to kind of drive that home, Turnitin even says it. We've got this number for you, but it's not cut and dry. But it's something that maybe you want to look at it if the number's high enough, depending upon your policy, your department policy, or the college policy that's being developed. All right, Pauline. So then this is further, when we click in it, we get this little report that says, here's 8%. It says, how do we detect generated writing? Well, if you want to find out more about how they do it, there is a link so that you can find out more about how it works, how much you want to geek out on it. But I also think it's interesting because it does give you an opportunity to leave them feedback, to let them know, yes, this was accurate. I talked to the student about this and they said, yep, I did 100% on AI. They admitted it. So good job, turn it in. Or they were able to present several forms of evidence that it was not as high a percentage as you said it was. So you need to refine your detector. You can give them feedback all those ways. Ding. All right, so here's the example. This was the example that was the 8%. It was in the introduction. So it was a 3 to 5 page paper. At the beginning, they didn't know how to do an introduction. I don't know about you. Introductions are always tough for me. I always write my introduction last because I know what I said. And so I can write the introduction about it. And they kind of gave up and said, I'm going to let ChatGPT write my introduction for me. So it was one paragraph that generated 8% of their AI detected. But it was right. It was accurate. They really did do this. So it's the idea of now you as an instructor, what do you do with that? And again, this has to do with your policy, your department policy, or the developing college-wide policy. Um, but this might warrant a conversation with the student. You know, why? Why did you do this? Oh, because I just got to the end. I just couldn't think of it, and so I just decided to do it. Or having the conversation with a student about what are alternative ways that they could think about it. Well, you go through and you review your paper, and you pull out key topics here, here, and here, and you write your paragraph based upon your key topics. It could be as simple as that. Being able to have those conversations because maybe they just didn't know how to write an introduction. Unfortunately, our students are coming to us and they don't always have great writing instruction. And so they aren't able to do this because they don't really know how. So sometimes it's bottom line, that's what it is. So there's a few different reasons that we might see something like this, but again, it warrants that conversation. Now, if the student is writing every single introduction with AI chat GPT or something like that, well, then that's a different conversation. So, the pattern has developed. All right, Pauline. All right, so Turnitin also offers a few other tools for you. They have an AI misuse rubric. So this is really helping detect the potential for AI misuse on your writing assignment. This is a tool for you to help make your prompt a little bit more AI proof. So Pauline, if you click the next page, what I did is I took a piece of that and I made it bigger because we couldn't really see that example. But inside Turnitin, you can access these tools. So this particular line was about critical thinking and reasoning. It helps you think about how can I improve my prompt? Does the writing task ask students to thoughtfully consider the issue and draw a conclusion based on their evaluation? So we have on the far right side, we have the prompt does not require students to analyze and synthesize the information. Students will not have to infer a conclusion based on what the prompt demands. ChatGPT's really good at that end because they don't really have to analyze things. They can just give you kind of a general discussion about something, and it's probably written fairly well a lot of the time. But on the far end of the rubric, the prompt requires students to skillfully analyze and synthesize the information. They can infer a logical conclusion considering multiple expert viewpoints, and it encourages them to create new knowledge based on novel ideas. So it's just helping to determine how do you write that prompt so that there's less potential for AI misuse. Do you totally delete it? No, probably not, because you might have some really savvy students who are great at writing prompts. And remember how I can revise those prompts and get it to write more and write better? It's possible, but this helps reduce it for your average user, at least, right? And that is something, but this is again something that might be a department discussion. It doesn't have to all fall on you. It might end up being a department discussion. How do we improve this prompt? And maybe you can't improve them all at once, right? Pick some key ones and then start filling in spaces. But it's a conversation that might be warranted. If we look at the next page, we'll see that there's a checklist that maybe that rubric feels overwhelming and crazy right now. And there's just too many things on there because it had student voice and had critical thinking and had like three other rows also. But this one helps you look at your prompt that you created. Does it align with your institution or your department's academic integrity policy? Does the prompt communicate the acceptable and unacceptable limits of generative AI tools for student responses? Okay, so here's what kids have said, but they didn't say I couldn't use ChatGPT. So there is that thought that when you're writing your prompt, you might add in there, acceptable AI use is to generate the original outline for your paper or to generate the brainstorming for this paper. However, the content of the paper must be your own original work. And it seems silly that we have to make that statement. But again, you could. in order to make sure that you are being clear and explicit, especially if you have some opportunities in your class when students can use the tool ethically, you're also teaching them when they cannot. And that can be very important for students who aren't sure where the blurry line happens. So, you just got all this information. What are your thoughts on AI detection? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Or are you still deciding? I see still deciding. Oh, Jill loves the checklist though. I've gotta love it. Still deciding. Anybody who's still deciding want to say why? What are some reasons you feel like you're still deciding? And no judgment. We're having a conversation. The idea of it, but not sure what it looks like in practice. Anyone want to unmute? I'm talking a lot.
Laura, I'll say something. So this has become a problem. I teach English with high school students in academic challenge, and we are spending a lot of time trying to figure it out. So it has become already a very big challenge for me and my adjuncts. It's just taking up a lot of our time.
So do you mean to deal with it, or
To
do you
deal
mean
with it,
to teach
yeah,
the students about it, or you mean the detection, or
all of it.
all
So
of it?
yeah, we don't have any clear policies about it. We're not sure how well, we've been trying different detectors, AI generated detectors, and sometimes even within the same paper, it doesn't give us the same percentage, which, makes us feel less confident about asking a student about it. And most of the time when we've gone to students, they've fessed right up. But, what happens when a student says no, and then, so it's just, whole new territory, and it's taking a lot of time to try and figure out how we're going to cope with it.
Yeah. And you make a really good point too. And one of the things I had attended a couple of online webinars about AI, the ethical use or the benefits or these drawbacks that we've talking about. And one of the things they said is to find that fine balance, right, Liza? I think that's what you're looking for between feeling like the police officer, the
Yeah.
FBI investigator, and still being the teacher. Because
Yes.
unfortunately, for all those honest students, you feel like you're spending all this time for the ones who may be academically dishonest. And all those honest students are kind of losing that time from you. And you're losing that time to really accurately and I'll think of the word, but you're of being able to evaluate what they've written and give them good feedback, constructive feedback, so that then they can continue to grow in their practice because that's what in their writing practice because that's what you're trying to support them in doing. And unfortunately, if you're trying to spend a lot of time on these AI detectors, that seems to detract the time that you actually have to spend for your real teaching. And that's understandable that you're feeling that frustration. Yeah.
So that was a question though I had about Turnitin.
Sure.
So, like from the student perspective, if you're using the AI detector, like we thought like a really good deterrent was if when they submitted the paper, that number popped up.
Mhm.
But it only looks like the Turnitin similarity report comes up on the student side, not the AI detection. Do we know if that's true?
I'm sorry, I will have to investigate that for you to find out, but I will investigate it
Yeah.
to be able to find out what that report looks like for students. I was focused all on you for this
Laura,
presentation.
everything I've been in, it says students do not have access to that.
Yeah, I
Now,
think it would be really helpful if they did.
things change so quickly though, but I was in something, a couple weeks ago and they said students don't have access to it.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. And I do remember, I think you might recall the communication that went out in the spring that it said AI detectors were now on Turnitin because it kind of surprised everyone. It all of a sudden popped up. Here's a number. Woo! And the students found out that they also had that announcement. And several of them, I guess it at least facilitated some conversations, because when their instructors or their chairs had those conversations with them, they said, yeah, as soon as I saw the note that you would be able to tell, I knew you'd catch me. So it was an interesting conversation for these students. But I understand what you're saying, is that at least they would have that opportunity to see if if you would suspect that they were highly similar. Yeah, I had a student in one of my courses that I wasn't sure, but the phraseology, it was just odd, the way that the words were put together. So in my feedback on it, and I did not have it as a turn in an assignment, so I don't have a number, but in my feedback on it, I said, I would really love to hear a little bit more of your voice, a little bit more of some real world examples in what you're writing, because right now it feels like it's kind of a fake thing that's been generated. You know what I mean? I said it. But I said, but I housed it in wanting to hear that student's voice because I thought they had so many good things to say. So I was trying to do it in a positive way, but then kind of put it out there. I'm watching you, and so we'll see how I can handle that in the future, right? With this particular student, but I've got my eyes on them. But anyway, I was just kind of peeking at the chat a little bit. Yeah, it is not things that, again, are tried and true, that if the number is there, that we know for sure that it happened. Just like Liza said, the students have to kind of fess up to it or not. But if we're having those conversations again with students about the use, it does become less exciting to get away with it if the students know that you know about it too. It's less exciting for that. And then if and when it turns up, there are probably other reasons that students have done it. But, all right, okay. Let's move on, Pauline. Again, for ethical discussions, you can talk to your students about what academic dishonesty is, what it means, how they would be suspected of it, and really it doesn't have to be belabored. We're talking about it a lot right now, but even if you just have a minute conversation, a couple of minutes in your first introductory course. By the way, I know that tools like, and I would not just say ChatGPT, I would say tools like ChatGPT exist, because then they know that you're savvy, that you know that's not the only one out there, right? And we'll talk about ways that you can use them and it's okay. And we'll talk about ways that you can't use them because it will detract from your learning, whatever reasons you give them. You can discuss the possible consequences, right? I mean, you can fail, you can be kicked out, right? It all depends on the level. So there are lots of things. And again, the college and department policies that are being developed in light of these tools. And it feels like they're not coming fast enough, but the idea is that we do want them to be good. So it might be valuable to take a little bit of time to develop them so that we feel that they're as comprehensive as possible, because making new policies can be a little bit like turning the Titanic, right? It's hard. It doesn't happen quickly because there's so many elements involved in those policies. But you can start with thoughts for your course, again, by putting that explicit thing. ChatGPT and tools like ChatGPT are not allowed to be used on this assignment, these assignments, things like that. All right, Pauline. And you can appeal to their moral side to talk about the importance of academic integrity. We're developing core values, kind of that foundation for them. There are real world applications for tools like ChatGPT. There's a value in future jobs of knowing how to use it appropriately. There are jobs that it is defined as part of that job, for instance, in marketing. They use ChatGPT or something like it to generate that initial text to generate that initial copy, and then they shape it and form it to the particular client they have in front of them. So there are applications for it, and it's not going away. We can put our head in the sand if we want to, but it's not going away. And this is how we build ethical leaders. I gave this example before, but I want to underline it again. There was a shooting in Michigan, right, in colleges. This was maybe almost a year ago now. But two neighboring colleges, their administrators generated memos on ChatGPT or a tool like it, and then distributed those without adding their own voice, without adding anything about their specific community, without using it as a draft and then finalizing it with their own words. And they were asked to resign. So there are ethical implications in our future where we could use it. But if they would have used that to create their first draft and then shaped it, modeled it, there would have been less outrage. Then it felt like they didn't care because they used ChatGPT to create this thing. They didn't care. Here, I just need something. I'll take what it gives me. Those are the problems, right, in that ethical use. All right, Pauline. So to reinforce these in your courses, you start at the semester, we talked about that. Start the semester, couple of minutes in your beginning conversations. This is how ChatGPT or something like it is acceptable, and this is how it's not. I know about this. This is what I think about it. And this is how I think it affects your learning. Try to see the benefits of it. And you and I can have more conversations if you want to reach out to me, because I have lots of ways that it's good and lots of ways that I'm still deciding, right? So, but then have those conversations throughout the semester. You have a new paper coming up, remind them of your policy. It doesn't take more than a minute or two. It doesn't take more than a couple of sentences. Remind them, maybe put the verbiage on the assignment page so that then they can't say, you didn't say I couldn't use ChatGPT for this. Unfortunately, I don't know how society has built this, but we've built that. The kids are like, hey, but you didn't say I couldn't do it. And so they look for it. And again, encourage that open communication so students can come to you and say, well, you know, I generated this with ChatGPT, my first draft or my outline. I don't know how to turn that into a paper. Can you help me? And maybe you can't help them to begin with. Maybe the way you help them is direct them to the tutoring lab. So now they can get some help figuring out, how do I turn an outline into a piece of writing? Your students haven't all had that experience either. So it's helping them recognize how to do it. Then you can spend your specific time helping them with that content specific information from something that the tutoring center has helped them generate from an outline to a piece of writing. And now you can use your expertise to really help them craft that to your department standards, to your course standards, to your subject standards. All right, Pauline. But I want to underline before we end the benefits of ethical AI generator use in the classroom. You're helping students learn about integrity. Maybe no one has ever had that explicit conversation with them about integrity and knowing how to use a tool like this ethically. And you're helping, by having these open conversations, you're helping to protect academic integrity so that now at least it's out there for them. You are helping them to develop those lifelong skills. We talked about future jobs that will use this. You're helping them determine, okay, what's pushing the boundary too far? How do I use this, but I don't lose my job over it? And then you as an instructor helping to expose them to those new tech tools and helping them realize that we all need a growth mindset of how we can adapt to new ways of learning, new ways of generating information, new ways of showing an understanding, so that then we can grow from this. We will talk about AI and how it can facilitate creativity. We'll talk about it as a tool or a threat to education also in future Lunch and Learns. All right, Pauline. So this is my question for you. Do you see how I'm all thoughtful in this Bitmoji? What are your thoughts or questions that we need to capture? I just told you we're going to talk more about this. Let's make it valuable for you. Do you have thoughts or questions that we need to address in future iterations of this? So I have my ideas ready for you, but I'm flexible and can inject things that are important to you. So if you can give me some ideas, that's great. And if you can't think of them right now, y'all have my email. So you can definitely send me a message or a Teams, and I'll be able to get them from there. I do see that we do have something in the chat about using ChatGPT for research, that they need to make sure that they find other reliable sources to support their GPT findings. And I love it that it's pointed out that the library can help with that. I know we have at least one librarian here. Did we have anybody else? I see Alice is here. Do we have Nita, are you a librarian also? Where are you?
I'm the new head librarian at Owens.
Owens, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. And I love that. One of my favorite features is Ask a Librarian. It's so useful. Students can go, you as instructors can go. I ask them, hey, this is how I'm trying to cite a source. Is this right? And they help me. It's lovely. And yes, Jean Marie, I know that Delaware Tech is developing that policy, but I don't know the time frame on it. But I do know that they're working on it. Again, I know it might take a little bit of time to develop it, but if we look at it from the other side, at least it will be as strong as it can be, because they're trying to gather the voices and the information that they need, and it changes so much so quickly. But we're trying to be as comprehensive as they can. So I kind of appreciate that approach to it, even if it's frustrating that we don't have it yet. Excellent. And Kathleen is pointing out some training, helping students really think about, how do you use this as a tool? What are the limits? How do you still think critically about this? I'll check on that for you, Nita. Nita or Netta? I want to say it right.
It's Netta.
Netta. Thank you, Netta. Okay. Yeah, after I said Nita, I'm like, nah, I bet you it's Netta. It's got to be phonetically better than that. All right. Yeah. And when we're thinking about that student mindset, that helping them realize. So one of the things that I do know was an example in a webinar that I went to, they had AI generate a paper, and they presented it to the students. And they asked the students, okay, what do you think? It's just, oh, this is good. Because the writing often sounds really good, right? This is good. Wow, we like it, all this other stuff. And then the instructor said, yeah, I would fail it. Oh, what do you mean you'd fail it? Well, because I asked it to include citations. There are none. So it did not accomplish the task. It's not supported. The writing is not supported. It doesn't have a reference page. So I would fail it. Oh, right. Well, then the other thing that they talked about then is ChatGPT, for instance, will hallucinate, is what they call it. That's the word they use. But it will hallucinate and make up resources because, especially if it doesn't have it does it because it doesn't have enough information. So it tries to create things. It's the way that neural network is working inside of ChatGPT. That's like, I think our students do that sometimes too, right? We might even feel like we do that sometimes. We don't have quite enough information, but we're trying to produce an argument. So it will present citations that don't exist. So students should always evaluate those citations, and their APA formatting is terrible. I've asked it to provide references for me, and they're terrible. It's a great place to start, and it's a great way for students to look at and figure out what's wrong, right? I mean, maybe that's what they're doing. We have these AI citations. Are they right? Are they wrong? How do you fix them? And having those conversations with students. Now, APA citations, there may be some courses that we go more deeply into it than other courses. But if we're all requiring, or most of us are requiring, some kind of APA citation, then maybe we take just a minute that we show them an appropriate one and tell them why it's right. And just take a couple of minutes. Or we have something that's set up as one of those surveys in D2L that we don't even have to grade it. The students can practice identifying the correct or the incorrect elements of a citation. And it's something that they can do to practice. We don't even have to grade it. we're just providing that resource for them and directing them to it. Those are some good ways that we can start. I see engineering. Hi, Dan. How are you, Daniel? It's good to see you. In the engineering field, a lot of the assignments are projects where they're based on calculations. Yes, they can input some data into AI. I mean, AI can do coding for you. It can write Java for you or something like that. That can be useful. And yes, if they're presenting it, if they rewrite it, yeah, you don't have much of an AI detector anymore, right? But in Bing, I can put a math problem into, there's a little tool side on the side of Edge browser. I can slide a picture that I snipped and put it into there and to ask it to solve it. It'll solve the math problem for me. And it's usually right. And it can even tell me all the steps that it followed. Now, here's my value I see in that. Here's the value I see in it. It shows me all the steps that it followed. So if I'm a student who has no idea how to approach this problem, now I see the steps that I need to follow in order to get there. If I'm a dishonest student, I pop it in there and I just copy it. But if I end up having some assessments that I don't have that tool available, I'm not going to know how to do it. So there's kind of that double-edged issue. I'm standing on the edge as that student. I'm taking those chances if I'm not truly trying to learn it. And then maybe we write our prompts differently. I like that you have projects though, Daniel, because those things are less AI-able, right? Pieces of them might be, but then the students have to put them together. All right, well, there was one more. Are there other thoughts at all, by the way?
So Laura,
yes, Jack.
What I was going to say was, I think as with students, also with faculty, it needs to be addressed. Like, let's say you're an adjunct, you don't have a lot of time, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to write all these prompts. You know what I mean? So, and you all did a good job of doing that in some of the earlier lunch and learns and sessions that you did. But I still feel like I could see certain people, even that I know, who teach in other, institutions, just being like, whatever, I'll write a rubric using this. And kind of like you said with the example of the people in Michigan who just sort of wrote the letter and were like, yeah, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I think it's kind of like a double-edged sword, I guess.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, because that's the thoughts for us to have as well, as far as what are the ethical uses that we can do with it. It'll write my lesson plan for me. But when I tailor it to my cohort of students, or when I tailor it to my style, right? I have a really great example for you for next week, by the way. It's going to be all about gravity, calm, and you will love it. I'm super excited to share it with you, actually. Okay, I can't contain myself too much. I asked it to write a lesson plan, and then I asked it to write a lesson plan in the style of an instructor who uses storytelling as their style. And it was completely different. It was still the same, but it was completely different. So you can go ahead and try that before the next lunch and learn if you'd like, and see what you get, or tune into that one and you'll be able to hear a great, it's really cool what it did. Really exciting. But when I take it and I tailor it to my students, tailor it to me, tailor it to this situation, it's more as a first draft or a brainstorming idea, then you can see how it's okay to have maybe some of those ideas, but I need to put myself into it. I mean, because we talked about it last lunch and learn the APA, you can cite AI generated ChatGPT stuff. There's a citation for it. But if you use too much of it, you have to include the entire copy of it in as an appendix, right? I think, or something like that. You have to include it because you can't recreate it again. Exactly. It will be different the next time that it's created. It will be different. So you have to include that. I guess it's seen as, like personal communication or something like that. Somebody was saying last time. So yeah, it's tricky. But again, I can't cite an entire thing that an author did in APA and quote it and have it be 3/4 of what I wrote and it's their words. I can't do that either. That's not ethical. And that's seen as an APA violation. So there's a fine line there, right? About how much could I quote anyway from my ChatGPT. right? So it's that kind of thing. And yes, AI is forcing us to think how we conceptualize or redefine our roles. It really is. And how we create those assignments for students. And that's why I said start with just one that you want to redesign. Don't feel like you have to do everything. Just start with one. And start with a friend that you do them together. You don't have to do it all by yourself. Call me, I'll help. All right, well, there was one more slide in that, but I'm not going to say Pauline share again or anything like that, because it was just telling you about October 11th. And I've told you a lot about October 11th. That October 11th, we're going to explore AI as a tool or a threat to education, and trying to really have a little bit more of a conversation there. And if you have examples to bring to that, things that you'd like to share, please do, because I love to hear your voices. Thank you for coming today. If anybody wants to hang out, have a little deeper conversation, you can. Otherwise, go enjoy your lunch.